At dinner one night, my son Edgar raised his voice and told me straight out, "You are a loser, but mom's new husband is not." I kept my mouth shut, but the words cut deep. A week later, Edgar was left without a car, without money, and without a roof over his head. That same night, my ex-wife called me in a panic, and what she told me ended up turning my entire world upside down. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories. We had been sitting around the family table in my Rockford home. The smell of roast beef still hung heavy in the air, mixing with the faint scent of mashed potatoes cooling on our plates. It was a mild spring evening in Illinois, the kind where you crack the windows open to let in the fresh breeze drifting up from the Rock River. Edgar, who was 31 at the time, sat across from me, jabbing his fork into what was left of his dinner with more force than it deserved. My daughter Ariana, 29, sat to my right. She wore her usual patient smile, always trying to keep things calm between us. We had been talking about ordinary things, work, the changing weather, the lilacs starting to bloom out back, when Edgar suddenly slammed his fork down. The sound shot through the quiet like a gun going off. "You are a loser, Dad," he barked, loud and clear. "But Graham, Mom's new husband? He is not. He has it all figured out. Big business deals, fancy cars, everything a real man should have." Then he added, "I think I will start calling him father from now on." His words were sharp and heavy, like a blade twisting in my chest. My hand tightened around my glass of water until the sweat on the outside made it slippery. I wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Not yet. Ariana gasped, covering her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide in disbelief. Behind Edgar on the wall hung an old photo from 10 years ago. It showed all of us at a barbecue, smiling like the world had not yet fallen apart. That was before the divorce shattered everything. How could he talk like that after all I had given him? "Edgar, that is not fair," Ariana snapped, her voice steady but edged with hurt. She leaned forward in her chair, trying to defend me. "Dad has always been there for us. He is the one who built this family, not some outsider. You are being cruel." Edgar snorted and shoved his plate away so hard it almost slid off the table. "Cruel? Take a good look at him, sis. He is still busting his back in construction at 6'3", scraping by like a nobody. Graham is the real deal. He knows how to win. Dad? He is just average." Then he shot up from his chair, the wooden legs screeching against the floor, making my skin crawl. I sat frozen, my mind flashing back to years earlier. Right after the divorce, when Celeste left me chasing what she called a better life, Edgar was 21. Fresh out of college, lost and unsure of himself. I had handed him the keys to a brand new Honda Civic. Not fancy, but reliable enough to get him started. "This is for you, son," I had said, proud to help him on his way. But instead of gratitude, he wrinkled his nose and muttered, "Thanks, I guess, but Graham drives a Mercedes." That sting never truly faded, though I had buried it under years of paying his rent, covering his bills, and supporting one half-baked idea after another. And now, here he was throwing those same words back in my face. "Edgar, sit down," I finally managed, keeping my tone low and calm, though my jaw ached from clenching. "We are family. We do not talk to each other like that." He let out a harsh laugh, one without an ounce of warmth. "Family? Do not kid yourself. You have been holding me back. Graham gets it. He is giving me real advice, real chances. You are outdated, obsolete." Then he snatched his jacket from the chair and stormed toward the door, his steps shaking the floorboards. Ariana reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Do not listen to him, Dad. He is wrong. You are the best father anyone could ask for. He is just, I do not know, jealous, maybe." Her words soothed me a little, though the wound was raw. She stood and wrapped me in a quick hug. "Nest, I will talk to him later. Love you." The front door clicked shut behind her, leaving me in a house that felt too quiet, too empty. I stayed there at the table, staring at the dirty dishes, half-eaten food, and crumpled napkins. The roast beef sat cold in its own juices. My thoughts ran wild, trying to make sense of his betrayal. Edgar was living rent-free in the house I had bought him, driving the car I kept running, yet he was worshiping Graham, the slick, 55-year-old businessman who had slid into our lives after the divorce. Graham, always in his tailored suits, always whispering in Celeste's ear about how he could take the family higher. And me? I was the one sweating in the Illinois heat, pouring concrete, raising 2 kids while building houses and futures. I looked at that photo again, the happy smiles frozen in time, mocking me now. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, each second amplifying the emptiness I felt. I did not clear the table. I did not move at all. I just sat there and let the anger roll around inside me until it started to take shape, hard and sharp. I thought about all the sacrifices, the night shifts, the vacations I skipped so his bills got paid, the times he rubbed Graham's name in my face. Enough was enough. If Edgar wanted to call me a loser, he was about to find out what life looked like without my support. It was time to draw a line. Later that night, I stepped out into the backyard. The air was crisp, carrying the sweet smell of lilacs from the neighbor's yard. I left the dining room lights burning, the messy table behind me glowing in their warm light through the sliding glass door. I pulled a cold beer from the fridge, the bottle dripping with condensation, and walked out onto the wooden deck, the boards creaking beneath my weight. The sky over Rockford was wide open that night, stars spread thick like someone had tossed handfuls of diamonds across dark velvet. I cracked open a cold one, the cap hissing off with a sharp fizz, foam spilling just a little over the rim. I took a long pull, letting the bitter taste match the bitterness growing in my chest while I paced the damp lawn, still wet from a spring shower earlier in the evening. Edgar's words would not leave me alone. They kept circling back, louder each time, feeding a fire I had tried to smother for years. I dropped into the old patio chair I had built myself back in the day, its paint peeling from too many winters, and stared up at those stars. It felt like they were pulling memories out of me, one after another. I thought about the day I bought Edgar that house, 5 years after the divorce. He was 26 then, drifting from one job to the next, always coming up with excuses. "Dad, I need some stability to get my feet under me," he had pleaded over the phone. So I dipped into what savings I had and put money down on a simple 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood not far from where I lived. Of course, the mortgage had to go in my name. His credit was already trashed. "This is your chance, son," I told him as we stood in the empty living room, the smell of fresh paint still hanging in the air. He grinned, clapped me on the back like I was his buddy, but before long the mortgage payments were draining from my account alone. Just this once, Dad, turned into just until I catch a break. And Graham? He was already circling back then, whisking Celeste away on fancy vacations while I covered the bills for our kids. I took another drink, the cold beer steadying me even as my anger kept rising. My mind jumped to last Christmas, Edgar ripping open the envelope I had handed him. Inside was a check to cover his car repairs. "Thanks, but Graham says he is going to invest in my ideas," Edgar had muttered, tucking the check away like it meant nothing. It was always Graham this, Graham that. That man had managed to worm his way into my ex-family's hearts, playing the hero while I was the one holding the whole structure up. But that night, standing under the stars, something hardened in me. I realized I was done letting this slide. Fairness had always been my guiding light. I had worked double shifts, come home with dust ground into my boots, skipped vacations, all so my kids could have the stability I never had. Edgar had taken that for granted, spitting on it. If he wanted to mock me, he would finally find out what life looked like without my help. I crushed the empty can in my fist, the sharp crinkle loud in the quiet, and set it down on the railing. By the time dawn started creeping up from the east, I had already made up my mind. The black sky softened into gray, and as the first slice of sunlight cut the horizon, I stood, every part of me locked on the decision I had formed overnight. The stars faded, but the clarity they gave me stayed. I skipped breakfast, grabbed only my truck keys from the hook by the door, the cool metal pressing into my palm. Sliding behind the wheel of my old pickup, the engine rumbled to life, a sound as familiar as my own heartbeat, breaking the stillness of a Rockford morning. The streets were lined with cars beaded in dew as I drove toward Edgar's place, the same neighborhood I had picked years ago because it was safe and close by. The morning air smelled of wet grass, but I was focused, not a hint of hesitation left. I pulled up outside his house. The Honda Civic sat in the driveway, shining from the last wash I had paid for. The house itself looked lived in, but careless, curtains pulled tight against the daylight. I stepped out, my boots crunching on gravel as I walked to the door. 3 firm knocks. Solid. Deliberate. Inside came shuffling, then the sound of the lock. Edgar opened up, hair sticking up, eyes half shut from a late night. He was in wrinkled pajamas, looking nothing like the cocky man who had insulted me across the dinner table. "Dad, what are you doing here so early?" he muttered, rubbing his face. I did not waste words. I stood square on the porch and said, "I am here for the car keys, Edgar. Hand them over." He blinked and let out a short, fake laugh that grated like sandpaper. "What? No way. That is my car. You gave it to me." "Gave it to you," I repeated, steady as stone. My eyes flicked to the Civic, and a memory hit me like a punch. I had surprised him with it when he was 21, still drifting after fresh out of community college. I had pulled up with a big bow on the hood like those commercials. "This will get you started, son," I had said, proud to hand him something solid. He had shrugged and muttered, "It is okay, I guess. Graham has something flashier in mind for me." That dismissal had stung, but I had brushed it off, still paying the insurance every month since. Now in the morning light, that memory only fueled me. I pulled a folded sheet of paper from my pocket, the registration. "It is in my name. I have paid every bill, every repair. It is mine. I am taking it back." Edgar's face went hard, his grip tightening on the doorframe. "You cannot just show up and take it. That is theft." I stepped closer, meeting his eyes. "No, son. Keeping something that is not yours, that is theft. Hand me the keys, or I will call the police right now and let them deal with it." His eyes flicked to the car and back to me, uncertainty breaking through his defiance. Across the street, a neighbor paused with a garden hose in hand, water spilling onto the sidewalk as she stared. The birds chirped overhead, a cheerful sound that only made the standoff heavier. Edgar finally gave in, muttering a curse as he disappeared back into the house. When he returned, the keys dangled from his fingers, his hand shaking just a little. He shoved them toward me. "Fine. Take it. But this is low, Dad. Really low. Graham was right about you. You are just bitter." I took the keys without answering, the metal heavy in my palm, a small victory I could actually feel. Sliding behind the wheel, the seat felt familiar, molded from years of use. I turned the ignition. The engine purred smooth thanks to the tune-up I had paid for just a few weeks earlier. Edgar stood on the porch with his arms crossed, fuming as I backed out. In the mirror, his figure shrank, but that burning glare stayed in my mind. The streets of Rockford stretched ahead, lined with budding maples and quiet homes. I felt a surge of momentum, the dashboard clock ticking forward as my thoughts locked onto the next step. Downtown was not far, and the bank would be opening soon. This was just the beginning. The drive carried me past familiar turns, the Rock River catching the sunlight on my left. I pulled the Honda into the bank lot, the pavement still damp and cool from the night. From the glove box, I grabbed the folder I had packed. Statements, deeds, every paper lined up neat and ready. The glass doors whooshed open as I stepped inside. The lobby was quiet, sunlight bouncing off polished tile while my boots echoed across it. At the counter, a young teller looked up, her blouse crisp, her face calm and professional. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" I laid out my identification and the mortgage papers, spreading them neatly across the counter. "I need to cancel the automatic payments tied to this property. I own it, but the living arrangement has changed." She nodded and started typing, her keyboard clacking steady. While she worked, my mind slipped back to the day I had signed those very papers. Edgar had been there in the real estate office, slouched in the chair, scrolling his phone while I scribbled my initials across page after page. "Thanks, Dad. This place is perfect," he had said flatly, not even glancing up. I had drained overtime paychecks into that down payment, the dust of the construction site still clinging to my skin. Celeste had already gone, swept away by Graham's promises, but I had wanted Edgar to have a firm foundation. Now, as the teller printed the form, that memory reminded me exactly why I was standing there. "Everything matches," she said, sliding the paper across. "Just sign here and the payments will stop. The resident will be notified by mail. It may take a few days." I pressed the pen firmly, the ink gliding across in one sure stroke. "That is fine. Thank you." Gathering the documents, I stepped aside near a potted plant, but my phone buzzed hard in my pocket. I answered, and Edgar's voice erupted before I could even say hello. "Dad, what the hell? The bank just called. Payments are stopping. You are evicting me. This is my house." I gripped the phone tighter, heat rising in my chest, but my words stayed calm. It is my house, Edgar. My name is on the deed. My money has kept it alive all these years. You were never listed as a tenant, never signed anything. You have been a guest, and I covered everything. You have had years to step up. His voice cracked, anger giving way to panic. You cannot do this. Where am I supposed to go? You are ruining my life over one comment. One comment? I repeated, pausing as a man walking through the lobby glanced over at the raised voice. This is not about one comment, son. This is years of you taking while I carried the load. Years of you leaning on Graham and spitting on me. It is time you stand on your own. Wait, Dad, listen. I did not mean it like that. Graham has been helping, but please, do not do this. His words tumbled out fast, desperate. I ended the call, the click final. His plea still echoed in my mind, but I slipped the phone back in my pocket. Another buzz came almost instantly, a text this time, probably from him or whoever he was dragging into it now. I pushed through the glass doors, sunlight hitting me square in the eyes. For a second, I wondered who he would run to next. Back home, the old front door creaked as I stepped inside, the bank papers tucked under my arm like a shield. The drive along the river had been quiet, the Honda running smooth, but Edgar's voice from that call clung to me like a shadow. I set the keys down on the kitchen counter. The clink of metal against granite echoed through the still house. Coffee was waiting in the pot, the rich aroma wrapping around me as I poured a cup. Steam curled up, steadying me as I sat in the worn armchair by the window. Sunlight broke through the curtains in golden stripes across the floor. My phone buzzed again. A message lit the screen. Ariana. Dad. Edgar just called me freaking out. He says you are cutting him off completely? What is going on? I took a slow sip, the heat running through me, and typed back short and clear, just reclaiming what is mine. He will be fine. I barely set the phone down before it rang again. Ariana's name flashed bright. I answered, leaning back in the chair, the fabric old and familiar against my shoulders. Hey, sweetheart, I said, keeping my voice steady. Dad, talk to me, Ariana replied, her tone quick and worried, words spilling out like she could not hold them back. Edgar is losing it over the car and the house. He said he is going straight to Graham. Says Graham is already talking about handling you, teaching you some kind of lesson. Are you all right? Her words hit me like a new wave breaking, but I kept my grip light on the mug in my hand, letting it all sink in. Graham again. Always Graham. That 55-year-old viper in a tailored suit, always working from the shadows. I walked to the window, looking out over the quiet street where a couple of kids pedaled past on bikes, their laughter faint against the spring air. I am fine, Ariana. Edgar is just blowing off steam. Tell me more. What else did he say about Graham? She hesitated, and I could hear her breathing on the line. Edgar said Graham offered to cover the mortgage for a little while, but only if Edgar cuts you off completely. And Graham laughed about it. Dad said, you have been a pushover too long. Edgar sounded like he believed him. I nodded to myself, the picture coming into focus. Of course, Edgar would run straight to Graham, the man who had slithered into our lives right after the divorce. My eyes landed on a faded photo on the mantel, all four of us at a 4th of July picnic, smiles wide, before everything broke apart. A memory came hard. It was the year after Celeste left. Graham showed up at Edgar's birthday dinner, uninvited, dragging in some shiny box with an expensive watch inside. It dwarfed the simple toolkit I had given my boy. Graham had smirked and said, your dad's great at building houses, but I am here to build futures. Edgar lit up, proud as anything, while I swallowed that insult. A month later, I sent in another tuition check, quietly covering the bills. That was the pattern, my sweat written off as ordinary, while Graham's flashy handouts became gospel. My inbox still had the transfers, my quiet support stacked higher than any thank you he ever gave. Thanks for the warning, I told Ariana, my voice firming. Graham's playing his games, but I am not backing down. This is about fairness. I know, Dad, she said softly. Just be careful. Edgar sounded serious. We talked a little longer, her steady words keeping me grounded before we hung up. I scrolled through old texts from Edgar, months of requests for cash, not one mention of gratitude. Each message stung, but with every one my focus sharpened. I started pacing the room, the floor creaking beneath me. I pulled up old emails on my laptop, looking at transfer records, rereading Graham's subtle digs that had slipped into family group chats I was no longer invited to. The pattern was undeniable. Outside, a neighbor slammed a car door, and the sound echoed like a reminder of doors shut in my own life. It was clear. Alliances were stacking up against me quicker than I had guessed. I set the phone down, already turning over strategies in my mind, planning my next steps. But before I could take a breath, the phone buzzed again. The name on the screen made my Jacoback tighten, Celeste. The living room suddenly felt smaller. My coffee had cooled, the steam gone, vanishing like old illusions. I answered and stood at the window, watching the calm street mock the storm brewing inside me. "Bruce, what on earth are you doing?" Celeste's voice blasted through, frantic, sharp, every word climbing higher. "Edgar is hysterical. He says you took his car and stopped the house payments. Have you completely lost your mind?" I breathed deep, steadying myself with a hand on the windowsill. The wood was smooth under my fingers. "Nice to hear from you too, Celeste. I have not lost anything. I took back what was mine, the car I bought, the house I financed." "You cannot just throw him out," she shot back, her voice breaking with emotion. "He is your son. Graham and I are worried, sick. Graham says if you do not fix this, he will get lawyers involved." There it was again, Graham pulling strings through her. I walked a slow circle through the room, each step measured. My eyes brushed over the photo on the mantel. Another memory surfaced. Those first months after the divorce, Celeste moving in with Graham while I quietly kept the money flowing, extra for Edgar's braces, checks for vacations I was not invited on. "Graham has big plans for the kids," she had told me once, her voice light. And I had written another check, staying silent, watching from the shadows. Now her panic revealed where the cracks really were. "Lawyers?" I said evenly, my voice carrying steel. "Let him try. Everything is in my name, Celeste. This is not cruelty. It is about respect. I built the ground Edgar is standing on." She paused. When she spoke again, her words softened into a plea. "Bruce, please, for old time's sake. Edgar needs stability. Graham says you are being unreasonable. He is willing to help, but only if you back off." I stopped pacing, my jaw set as clouds thickened outside, dulling the daylight. "Graham's help always comes with strings. Tell them both. I am finished being the silent provider. Edgar learns now, or he never will." Her voice cracked. "You do not understand. He says he will cut you out completely. We are family, Bruce. Fix this before it is too late." Then she hung up. The silence after her voice was louder than the call itself. I set the phone down, pulled a notebook from the drawer, and flipped to a clean page. The paper felt crisp under my hand. Ideas started pouring in, defenses, countermeasures, steps to take. My pen scratched across the page, mapping out a path forward. Not long after, with the notebook tossed onto the truck's passenger seat, its pages marked with rough plans, I turned the key. The old engine roared awake, steady and strong, cutting through the quiet Rockford afternoon. The spring sun sat low in the sky, stretching long shadows across my dashboard as I eased out of the driveway. At a red light downtown, I scrolled through my contacts, my thumb stopping on a name I had not used in years. My old lawyer, Jacob. We had crossed paths back when a few construction deals went sour, and I knew he could be trusted. This was not the time for hesitation. The pressure was closing in, and I needed solid ground under me. The light flipped green, and I pressed the gas, heading toward his office on the edge of town. In the rearview mirror, the rock flashed in the sunlight, steady and relentless, a reminder of how currents run deep beneath the surface. His office sat in a plain brick building. I parked, stepped out, and pushed through the door. The smell of fresh coffee greeted me, drifting from a pot in the waiting room. The receptionist gave me a nod and waved me through. Jacob stood to shake my hand when I walked in, his desk cluttered with papers, his grip as strong as I remembered. "Bruce, what's going on?" he asked, settling back into a chair that creaked under him, his sharp eyes peering over wire-rimmed glasses. I opened my notebook, its pages full of notes, and laid out the essentials. Taking back the car, cutting off the mortgage payments, Edgar's meltdown, Graham's threats, and the talk of dragging lawyers into this. I kept my voice steady, just the facts. I need to know my protections. Everything's in my name, but they are already talking lawsuits. Graham's got businesses. Any holes I need to worry about? Jacob sifted through the stack of deeds and records I had brought, tapping his pen as he read. Smart move coming now. The house, the car, both solid. Your ownership is airtight. If they try emotional distress or some nonsense about undue influence, we will bury that under years of records showing your financial support. He turned another page, pausing. As for Graham, his companies have had some tax liens pop up. Nothing huge, but it is leverage if he gets pushy. I can draft a cease and desist letter to have on hand. We dug deeper, Jacob asking sharp questions like he was checking the foundation of a building. Any shared accounts? Business ties with Edgar? I shook my head. While he stepped out to make copies, an old memory came back. Graham's first real encounter with Edgar at a family dinner after the divorce. I remembered Graham slipping him a business card, grinning like he owned the room. Stick with me, kid. Your dad's handy with tools, but I build empires. I had overheard it while writing another rent check, swallowing my pride. When Jacob returned, he cut to the point. File for full title transfer on the house. That move will force their hand and protect your position. I left his office with a folder of draft paperwork in hand, my footsteps echoing down the hallway. The weight on my shoulders felt lighter, like I had finally set a load down. But one stop was not enough. My next turn was the accountant. I drove across town, the truck humming over familiar potholes until I pulled into a lot shaded by young oak trees just starting to leaf out. Inside, the air smelled sterile, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Mary, my accountant, gave me a quick nod. Her desk was buried in spreadsheets, as always. Bruce, been a while. Sit down. What's happening? I spread out the financial statements, tapping at the transfers and mortgage lines. I cut off support for Edgar. Graham's circling, and I need to know if there's any hidden tie I missed, any loopholes he could use. She adjusted her glasses, fingers flying across her keyboard as she pulled up digital records. Your accounts are clean. No joint ownership with Edgar anywhere. But Graham's firm? I have seen filings with questionable deductions. If you wanted to raise a flag with the Internal Revenue Service, let's just say they never ignore tips. Her voice was calm, practical. Then she leaned back, studying me. Why now, Bruce? I met her eyes. Because respect's been overdue. I have carried them long enough. She nodded, jotting notes. Then here's where you start. Freeze any credits tied to him. And yes, there are anonymous channels if you want to report irregularities. She slid a few printed summaries my way. As I gathered them, my mind drifted back to a winter years ago. I had wired money into Edgar's failed startup while Graham circled from a distance, collecting consulting fees I unknowingly covered. Mary's advice sharpened my anger into a weapon. Secure retirement first, and if they sue, countersue for repayment of so-called gifts. By the time I left her office, the sun was dipping, my folder heavier with annotated strategies. Driving home along the river, I ran mental checklists, first steps ready for tomorrow. At my desk that night, papers spread under the lamp, legal on the left, financial on the right. I got to work. I logged into the portal, processed the title transfer on Edgar's house, and watched the confirmation email land. Next came certified mail, one envelope to Edgar, another to Graham's office. Asset freeze notices stamped and sealed. A memory flashed of Graham's smug toast at Celeste's remarriage, his voice drowning my quiet sacrifices. Fueled by that, I sent an anonymous tip through the IRS system. Mary's flagged deductions lined up as evidence. Back at the desk, inbox updates rolled in, bank confirmations, mail trackers. Each ping tightened the wall I was building. Then Edgar's name lit up on my phone, buzzing hard against the wood. Before I could answer, another ping, an email from Graham, subject screaming, "Cease your interference." His message threatened lawsuits and accused me of meddling with family assets. Moments later, the phone rang. Graham himself. "Bruce, you old fool." His voice boomed, polish stripped by rage. "You froze accounts, dragged my business. Are you jealous? You'll regret this. My lawyers will bury you." I stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker. "Jealousy?" I said. "I reclaimed what was mine. Years of sweat while you played empire builder. Threaten all you want. My lawyer's ready." His laugh was jagged. "You? Against me? You'll lose. Edgar doesn't deserve this. You're destroying him." "Destroying?" I shot back. "I'm teaching him responsibility, something you never did." I cut the call. Save it for the judge. The knock at my front door was immediate, heavy as thunder. Through the peephole, Edgar stood wild-eyed under the porch light. I cracked the chain, but he shoved. "Let me in, Dad. You've gone too far. You took my car, my house. Now Graham says audits? You're ruining everything." He stormed inside, face flushed, voice jagged. "You don't get it. Graham's offering me a place. Loans. You're bitter because Mom chose better." I held firm. "Chose better? I chose you. Every paycheck, every sacrifice was for you. Graham's help is control. Walk away or stand on your own." Edgar paced the room, his agitation spilling into every movement. He brushed past the coffee table, bumping a picture frame until it sat crooked, the old family photo now hanging at an angle. His face twisted, his words sharp. "Consequences? I'm homeless because of you. Fix this, or I'll side with Graham's lawsuit. We'll strip you of everything." The tension spiked, his voice reverberating off the walls in jagged echoes. I kept my composure, refusing to match his fury. "Go ahead, Edgar. File whatever you want. The truth is on my side." That only fueled his rage. He stomped to the door and slammed it shut with such force the frame rattled on the wall. From the window, I watched as he stormed down the walkway and slid into a car I didn't recognize, likely one Graham had tossed him. Tires screeched against the asphalt as he tore away. The house settled back into silence, but it wasn't peaceful. The air carried a charge, as though unfinished business was humming just beyond reach. By morning, that storm began to take shape. A delivery van pulled up, its engine grumbling as the driver hopped out with a thick bundle of envelopes. I stepped onto the porch, the spring sun warming my shoulders as I signed for them, the embossed seals flashing like medals of progress. At the kitchen table, I slit one open and pulled out the foreclosure notice. Edgar's house was officially in proceedings, eviction timelines stamped in unforgiving black ink. Later that afternoon, I drove past the property. The Honda's engine purred steady as I eased near the curb. A moving truck sat in the driveway, laborers hauling boxes beneath a gray, heavy sky. Edgar stood in the middle, shoulders bent, directing the work with half-hearted gestures. The lawn that had once been neatly trimmed now showed neglect, weeds breaking through cracks in the concrete, mirroring the fractures in his pride. I didn't stop, didn't roll down the window. I just observed quietly as reality tightened around him, a muted satisfaction settling inside me. Halfway home, my phone buzzed. Edgar's name glowed on the screen. I pulled over by the riverbank, the water licking against the shore, and answered. "Dad, please," he said, his voice raw and broken. Nothing like the shouting from the night before. "The eviction came. I'm packing everything. I don't have anywhere to go. Graham's place is only temporary. Just help me one last time." My hand clenched on the steering wheel, the worn leather pressing into my palm. A memory rose unbidden. Edgar as a 10-year-old boy, clutching my hand during a storm when the power went out, looking to me to fix everything. Back then, I wired the generator, lit the house, built safety where there was none. But that boy was gone, buried under years of taking and entitlement. "One last time?" I said steady. "It's been a lifetime of one last times, Edgar. This is where it ends." He tried to bargain, his words tumbling out. "I'll apologize. I'll cut Graham out. I'll do anything. Don't let me end up on the street." His desperation tugged, but I didn't bend. An apology doesn't rebuild respect. You need to stand on your own. Call me when you're ready for that. And I ended the call. The river flowed beside me, steady and inevitable, just like the consequences he now faced. I shot a quick update to Jacob, my lawyer, through text. His reply came back fast. Proceedings were moving, Edgar's stalling tactics failing. Back home, I filed the notices into my desk drawer, the paper edges whispering as they slid into place. My focus shifted past Edgar to Graham. His businesses were already under scrutiny, irregularities coming to light. The net was tightening. With eviction papers neatly stored, their sharp corners still fresh in my mind, I tucked my folder under my arm and drove to a cafe downtown. The spring air carried a faint trace of rain as I parked the truck, its door closing with a familiar click. Inside, steam curled from a latte at a corner table, mingling with the hushed shuffle of newspapers and clink of cups. I sat, sipping slowly, the warmth grounding me as I dialed Jacob. "Bruce, what's the latest?" His voice came crisp and direct. I flipped open my folder. Mary flagged Graham's tax discrepancies, overstated expenses, shady deductions from last year. Time to push this forward, anonymous tip or through your channels. Papers shuffled on his end. "Do both." "I'll handle the formal complaint. Compliance flags like this draw fast audits. Send me the packet. We'll certify it today. I jotted notes on a napkin, the pen gliding across as I reviewed the summaries again. My mind flashed to a holiday years ago, Graham smug raising his glass high. To building legacies, he'd said with a wink at Edgar. I'd stood in the background, calloused hands shoved in my pockets after wiring money to fund that very trip. Back then, he had cast himself as the visionary, my quiet support erased. Now, the cracks in his foundation were visible for everyone to see. I emailed the scans from my phone, the progress bar crawling to full. Through the cafe window, the street outside bustled, cars sliding by like gears meshing in a larger machine. My plan was in motion. That afternoon at home, my laptop lit with the first ripples. A local business news clip mentioned whispers of investigations into Graham's company, clients pulling contracts as rumors of fines spread. I tried calling him, but voicemail cut in after 2 rings, his once slick greeting clipped short. That evening, a message arrived, his voice strained, evasive. "Bruce, stop whatever you're doing. We can talk. Let's settle this quietly." I ignored it, digging deeper into public filings. His rushed restructuring attempts were plain, asset shifts, shell games, but too late. The penalties were building. His empire trembled. Silence from his side grew louder each day while a hum of victory filled my quiet house. Driving later as dusk settled, the river caught the fading light, gold flickering on its surface. My thoughts wandered. Would there be apologies or just more excuses? Justice carried its own weight, heavier than I expected. Back in my kitchen, shadows stretched long across the counters as I set a cup down. Then came the sound, 3 deliberate knocks at the door, echoing through the house. I walked to the door and looked through the glass. Edgar stood on the porch, shoulders sagging, a hesitant shape against the fading twilight. When I opened it, a cool draft swept in, carrying the smell of rain on its way. "Edgar," I said evenly, stepping aside. "Come in." He entered slowly, hands buried in his pockets, eyes fixed on the floor. I switched on the living room lamp, its warm glow filling the room as he lingered near the mantel. His gaze landed on the old family photo, and when he finally spoke, his voice was low, each word heavy with regret. He told me he had not slept all night at Graham's house. The mansion felt cold, all marble and glass, empty of comfort. Graham's help, Edgar admitted, had strings tied to every word. His promises hollow compared to years of my quiet sacrifices. The eviction notice had cut through his pride at last. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking, "I messed up, badly. Getting thrown out, crashing at Graham's. It all hit me at once. I took you for granted, called you a loser while living off the sweat of your work. I am sorry, truly." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, letting his confession hang in the air. A memory stirred. Edgar as a boy, smiling ear to ear when I finished building his treehouse, the 2 of us laughing under a summer sky. Graham could never steal that. But now that innocence had to be replaced by responsibility. "Words are a start, son," I said at last, "but actions matter more. You have leaned on crutches for too long." Edgar nodded and pulled a small envelope from his jacket, its edges creased, the handwriting plain. "I know. No more handouts. I have a job interview tomorrow. Hard labor, the kind you started with. Graham's pulling away too, after the business hits. I see now he only used me to get at you." Before I could respond, the front door opened again. Ariana slipped inside, her key turning softly. She looked around, sensing the weight of the moment. "Dad, Edgar texted me. Everything okay?" Edgar turned to her, his voice cracking with honesty. "Sis, I am owning up. Dad is right. I need to build my own way." The 3 of us sat at the table for a simple meal of sandwiches I had prepared earlier. I placed each plate down carefully, not fancy, but deliberate. Ariana offered her brother a small, encouraging smile. "It is a step, Edgar. Dad has always been fair." I extended my hand across the table. Edgar gripped it firmly, sealing the moment. No tears, no speeches, just boundaries drawn. "You are family," I told him, "but the support ends here. From now on, you earn it." Graham stayed silent in the background of our lives, no calls, no messages, his absence speaking louder than his presence ever had. When Edgar left that night, promising change, Ariana hugged me tight. "Proud of you, Dad." Later, I filed the last of the papers away, the rustle of the pages like closing a chapter. Then I stepped out into the backyard. Above me, the stars shimmered against the dark sky. I lifted my glass in a quiet toast to new beginnings. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. And as always, thank you for watching.